Would you say I have a plethora of amplifiers?
Good morning. Did you catch that cultural reference? Anyway, when you've been gigging as long as I have, you tend to accumulate things, including amplifiers. Now, I've been gigging almost 50 years, and I would say the first 20 or 25 years, if I wanted a new amplifier, I had to sell the old one. This is especially true if you get married. Now, after that time, I was able to keep the old amplifiers. I was financially secure enough that I could buy a new one without selling the old one. If you're married, it'll depend on the terms of your divorce, whether you can do that. So anyway, I've accumulated a number of amplifiers, and what you saw in that clip is just a fraction of the amplifiers I've owned over the years. But they all have a purpose, and there was a reason why I bought them all. So let's talk about them.
Okay, the first gigging guitar amp I had was a mid-60s Princeton Reverb amp. I was a sophomore in high school. I used this to play polkas and standards every Saturday night at the Conway Croatian Club, making a grand total of $20 per performance. Nice little amplifier. So when I wanted to get into rock and roll and get away from polkas, I wanted a bigger amplifier, so I traded that Princeton Reverb in for this beautiful blue Custom 100 guitar amplifier. What a move. Here you can see that custom amp behind me, playing at the Beaver High School homecoming dance or prom or some such thing. I'm playing my 1960 Les Paul double cut special. I traded that too. So by 1971, I was not happy with that custom amplifier, so I got rid of that and picked up a trainer stack. That would be this head, and I had two of the 412 cabinets. So my amps kept getting bigger and bigger, but this trainer was a big improvement over the custom. If you look in the back, you'll see my trainer stack that is taller than the tallest guy in the band who's standing right next to it. And in 1972, when even the trainer stack wasn't loud enough for my lust for volume, I moved on to a twin reverb sitting on top of a dual Showman cabinet loaded with whatever they were, D130, D140, I think they were JBL 15-inch speakers, thus explaining my loss of hearing. If you look to the right, you can see my twin reverb sitting on top of my dual Showman cabinet. I'm playing my early 70s gold top Les Paul Deluxe. And sometime around 1974, I traded that twin reverb for a Sound City head such as this with the very confusing 6 inputs. This is the only amplifier that I had that could compete with or maybe even exceed a twin reverb in volume. Here I am, and in the back, you can see my Sound City head sitting on top of one of my old Trainer 4x12 cabs. Talk about loud. And in 1975 or so, in an interest to downsize, I acquired this blonde Bandmaster rig. And boy, if there were any amplifier that I've shown so far that I could have back, it would be this one. It was a beautiful sounding amplifier, not nearly as loud as the twin reverb. Here I am gigging with my blonde Bandmaster rig. Boy, do I miss that one. And in 1976 or so, I joined a band that wanted that Marshall sound. So I acquired one of those 50-watt Marshall Master Volume heads. Great sounding amplifier. Back then, they brand new. They were $325 out the door. Here I am gigging with my Marshall head, going into my blonde Bandmaster cab. I see a couple pedals sitting on the floor that aren't connected. I have no idea what they are, but I see that I'm stomping on my wah-wah pedal, which I still have to this day. You'll notice in the back there's also the Echoplex. I think it was the EP3. It was not the tube one, but the solid state one. And I'm playing my 1964 Gibson SG Special. Man, do I miss that guitar. Okay, and then of course in the late 70s, everybody wanted a boogie. I was no exception. And back then you would call Randall Smith and you would send him $200 and it'd start building your amplifier. You'd send him another $200 and it'd finish it. And then when you paid the balance off, he would ship it to you. And I think in total I had $900 and some into this project to get this Mesa Boogie Mark IIB. Great amp. And if you look to the right, you can see my Mesa Boogie Mark IIB amplifier sitting beside the Lab Series. And yes, that is a 53 Blackguard Telly. In the early 80s, I switched from rock music to country music. I was not happy with where rock music went in the 80s. That whole big hair, highly processed thing left me cold. So I got into Willie and Waylon and Merle, and I acquired this Lab Series L5. I took out the two 12-inch speakers and put in a single EV15, just as Ray Flack had done. And here's a picture from rehearsal. It was definitely a Lab Series L5 I can see there. That's myself and my daughter at rehearsal. And here behind me, you can see my Lab Series. Then in the mid-'80s, I acquired this beautiful deluxe reverb amp. Now someone had added an extra speaker, a 10 or an 8-inch or something like that, so I had to replace the speaker baffle, and it's got new grill cloth. But it's a 1966 deluxe reverb, has been one of my main gigging amplifiers for a long time. Perfect for country music, perfect pedal platform. And here you see the old deluxe reverb on stage. Looks like the Midway. Fun place. Now my deluxe reverb amp had a habit of occasionally breaking down. It's on its second power transformer, and I don't know how many filter caps have been replaced. There's a lot of high voltage inside those things. So when I had an opportunity to pick up this deluxe amp for $50, I did. And it was my backup. And I think it got just as much use as the deluxe reverb. It is essentially a deluxe reverb without the reverb. It's a great little amp. And then one Christmas in the early 2000s, everyone got together and gave me gift cards to Guitar Center. So I went to Guitar Center and I picked up this Egnator. A lot of interesting features on this amp. In fact, I have some videos about it. I really like the clean channel. I'm not that fond of the dirty channel, but the clean channel is beautiful. And I did use this often, playing country music mostly. And here I am with my Parts Telecaster plugged into the Egnator Rebel 30, playing country music. And around 2010 or so, after our local legend Biff Parsons hit the big time, I had to try a Dr. Z. And I found this Carmen Gia combo on eBay for a great price, and it's a great amp. I still use it today. And there I am at the Midway again, gigging with my Dr. Z Carmen Gia. And sometime around 2014, I started playing rock music again, and I found this 65 amps London Pro. Channel 1 is like a Vox AC30 with all that chime, and channel 2 is like a glorious 50-watt Marshall, but the whole thing is only 18 watts. It has a thing called master voltage, which lets you bring the volume down even more. It is the best rock and roll amp by far that I have ever had. I highly recommend it. And if you look close in the back on the left, you'll see my 65 amps London Pro, the absolutely perfect rock and roll amplifier. Tube amplifiers do break down, and when I had to send the London Pro back to California for repairs, I couldn't live without that 65 amp sound, so I picked up this 65 amps Ventura, which is another fantastic 6v6 based amp, perfect for rock and roll. I do have some other odds and ends, like this Fender Bassman reissue. When I worked at Bright Music Center, I talked the owner into stocking this amplifier, and it never sold, so I ended up buying it at cost. I took it to one gig, and at the end of the first set, the band manager and the sound man told me to put my old amp, the Deluxe Reverb, back on stage. So it never really had a fair shot on stage, but I do use it here in the studio. And then there is this Mojotone Princeton Reverb clone. Now, I don't gig very often anymore, but if I do get called to fill in down at the bowling alley, I take this little guy. It's a great little amp. Now, as I said before, I'm not gigging much these days. I'm getting pretty old for that sort of thing, but these amps do get a lot of use in the studio. And if you would like to see them in use, just go to YouTube and search for The Guys Downstairs, and you'll see these amps in use. Thanks for watching.